You say that's what I
Yeah.
So you still have that storage
She says that.
I do. They are back. Are back. We just put a dozen nests. But yours are the nest. Hi, folks. If I could get your attention, please. I know most of you quite well, and some of you over an extended period of time, but many of you don't know Brad Gooderham. And Brad and I are going to talk today. He's talking for 20 minutes, and I'm talking for 20 minutes, and you can time me, please, yes, with that if I exceed it. And we have a spot for about 20 minutes, and both of us are going to describe research that we've done that deals with essentially learning in the 21st century, and a different kind of theme. And let me stop there and introduce Brad. And Brad, the floor is yours.
Great. Thanks very much, Bob. Let me first say that it is an absolute pleasure and honor to be here with you today. A little bit about me. My name is, as Bob said, Brad Gooderham. I originally came to the Yukon after meeting Jesse Jewell at a conference, and Bob as well. And they kind of sold me on what was going on up here in experiential education. I came up and I worked with Kathleen McDade in the SACE program for a month and had an absolutely transformational teaching experience. So as a teacher chaperone, I was a learner and an educator, and it really, it took it up a level for me. And so when I went to Royal Rose, I did a thesis on experiential education and specifically student perceptions, Yukon student perceptions of the instructional programming models for the development of the 21st century core competencies. It's a mouthful, that's what they like in academia. They like to be complex. And I'm very pleased to be presenting this to you today. Before we begin and do anything else, we'll be tackling some new ideas, some kind of emergent pedagogies, and one thing that we need to focus on is how are we thinking? How are we conceptualizing these new ideas? There's the binary model that is either right or wrong. It's black or white. It's 1 or 0. But then we have the capacity for a systems thinking model. How many ways can we get to an answer that is good or that is right or that works for us? And so I would encourage you all to open your minds. If you find that you kind of get a mental block on something, say like, that wouldn't work. Challenge yourself to say, wait a second, how might that work? Or what's a workaround for that? That's usually a big challenge. That was a big challenge for me coming into this. I have 3 theses that I was moving forward with, ideas that I took into this, and it was that experiential, especially integrated education, is the optimal 21st century approach. That digital technology will be one of the key literacies that our students need for holistic success in the future. And that the conscientious blending of these 2 models, that nature-based and the technology-enabled, will provide our students with the skills and competencies for holistic success. And what I mean there is social, emotional, physical, economic success. So in the 21st century education movement, just a very brief overview, the emphasis is on humanistic core competencies. It's not so much rote learning or being able to repeat facts. It's about how we approach problems and how we can problem solve. So creativity, collaboration, critical thinking, some of the core literacies such as digital, social, financial literacy. In my research, the one thing that I found that was universally omitted, not mentioned once on any website, in any paper, anywhere that I could find, can anybody guess? You can call it out if you have.
Environmental.
Environmental. What else? What else could you add to that list?
Spiritual literacy.
Spiritual, yeah, that's a good one. What's that?
I'm just trying to figure out which you're adding to the list. Are you asking for fundamental literacies or emphasis on?
Yeah, what literacy could you add to the list for 21st century literacy? There are a number there, right? Physical literacy, sure. Social literacy, yeah, a number. The one that, and remember, this is in a, outside of the binary mindset. It's not right or wrong. There are hundreds of good answers. The one that I universally could not find was ecological. Ecological literacy, even though it is probably the most important skill that we can give to our children to help themselves create a better world and us, is universally omitted.
One of the first things that Gardner had in the original intelligence that was brought in.
Yeah, that's right. So my research in Whitehorse specifically dealt with some of the models that are kind of epitomized or embraced by the Wood Street School model. I'll call it that just as a generalization, although I know that there are many in other schools. And I called those the integrated models. So courses that are run in a cohort-based, semester-long or sometimes year-long in other places. The students I looked at were grades 9 to 11. I had an N of 89 with 55 in the test and 33 in the control. The tests were the integrated, the control were the conventional models. These were students tested in January at the end of their first semester and at the beginning of their second semester when they were in the integrated models. So ACEs, FACEs, ES11, etc., chaos. And what I really wanted to focus on was what are the student perceptions of their development of the core competencies listed for 21st century education. My ambition was to collect quantitative empirical data. We have quite a bit of data that is anecdotal, that deals with impressions and interviews and how we felt these things were. What I really wanted to do, and my focus was to reach out to the policymakers and the administrators and give them a sense of the quantitative performance of these programs. Does it improve student outcomes? Do students feel that this is working for them? And what is the measure of that? So we can make solid data-driven decision-making or decisions. My research findings were stark. In 9 of the 12 categories of 21st century core competencies that I tested, there was a statistically significant difference in the responses from the integrated over the conventional. And if you can't see here, they're also put up there. Everything from social literacy to ecological literacy was absolutely, there was no competition really in the student perceptions of how they develop these core competencies. One other thing I wanted to say. Oh, that there were other statistical measures, even though it was the test group was 33. There was statistical calculations, the Cohen's D, if that means anything to anyone here, that accounts for, maybe my wife, that accounts for small sample sizes. So it is somewhat corrected. Now here's some of the most, what I would say, revealing or accessible figures. On the left, or on your right, we see the averages, the average ratings of all these competencies, the extent to which these competencies were developed. It was a rating scale of 1 to 10. Students rated each out of 10. The average for the integrated group was 71.3, and the average for the conventional group on all of these was 47.8. In red, you can see that if we were to give a grade, a conventional grade, that would be less than 50%. So in 9 of these categories, sorry, 8 of these categories, students in the conventional system indicated that they would give a failing grade to their sense of core competency development. Now, my role and my objective here is not to disparage what is happening out there, but to shed light upon areas that we can really focus on to strengthen. And I have another marker, and my thesis supervisor wanted me to take out the combined mean averages, so the combined means, which I put these two numbers together and came up with a number. And he said, it's not statistically important. And I said to them, no, it is important because we get an idea of, over the course of a year, over the course of their career in academics, how they actually develop these skills, right? If they're involved in the conventional and the integrated, right? Do they get these skills in a significant way? Which I thought was very, very important, because these students can be in both of these, and I think it's a better indicator of the quality of education that's provided in the Yukon for your students. Two things I wanted to highlight on the left here. Ecological literacy was 8.8, an A+. In the conventional, and it was 3.45, not even a grade letter for that here. So at complete opposite ends of the spectrum, which is telling when we think about the imperative of ecological literacy, or the imperative that I would put on ecological literacy for the holistic well-being of our future generations. Digital literacy, although this can be a deceiving chart, but when we look at the means, 6.36 for digital literacy, even though it ranked second last, it is still higher than the 5.12 mean that the conventional students ranked it to number 3. So it's still significantly higher, even though it's much lower. The 4.54, the lowest financial literacy here, is somewhere around here. Digital literacy, 6.36, is still higher than even the highest rated social literacy. There is the average ranked by means, as I was mentioning before, and everybody but financial literacy passed, which I think is something to work with. We know where to focus our strengths over the course of the entire year or their career in high school. So my practical recommendations, it's what I really want to drive home is that the systematic assessment of our programs, or your programs in the Yukon, will provide solid research and data that we can then go on and use to improve our programs. We can find the areas that need strengthening, and we can focus our resources and energy there. We know from just this one tiny study, and I would emphasize that my study is barely a pilot study. But if this were taken on as a longer study, we would get a very good longitudinal view of how these kids are actually performing over the long term. So developing these avenues for getting research and driving our decisions with solid data, that would be very important. Along with the data, what I'd really like to encourage is the adoption of 21st century literacies, both as teachers for our students, but as teachers for ourselves. We as teachers also need to get on board with this. Our world is rapidly changing, and the sooner that we avail ourselves to the learning and the training, and we become learners alongside our students, the better off we'll be as teachers to help them deal with the challenges and opportunities in the future. Of course, you can help provide administrators and policymakers with data, and I think that is what's going to drive really solid decision making. I tossed in differentiation of programs for different blends of learning styles. I love what the Yukon is doing. There are so many programs up here. I think, Bob, you said 15 programs, integrated programs. In Vancouver, there's one. You are so far ahead of the curve. You're a world leader, in my opinion, in this style of learning. We talk about Finland and the PISA ranking as what's Finland doing? What's Finland doing? Finland is doing what you're doing and what you have been doing for 15 years. It's phenomenon-based, de-siloed teaching. There's every reason why Whitehorse could become the next Finland, or to share your your successes so that people look to you for how to teach 21st century education. Let's ask ourselves why we do the things the way we do them. Is this based in how we've always done it? Or is this based in good solid research? Did you know that the class structure of, I'll take a break from the presentation. Did you know that the class structure, the 45-minute to 60-minute classes, 4 or 6 to 8 of them a day, 4 to 5 days a week, is based on the administration of a turn of the 20th century pension fund? Yeah. The reason kids sit in 45-minute classes is so Andrew Carnegie could administer a pension fund to retiring teachers. It has nothing to do with education. So we have to go all the way back and say, why do we even have this structure?
I mean, our economic system, we report on an annual basis because we grow crops on a solar system. So because the sun rotates this much because they didn't like the lunar system used by the Muslims.
Right.
So we assess kids on a solar system and treat them like they're crop, not children.
It all comes back to sun worship, I guess. And now we have to question, like, should we really be worshiping the sun as an administrative model? Or can we develop a more educative model to help our students?
I mean, when we're reporting on whether or not a kid's done well, are we measuring the development, are we measuring what we know about neurobiology and psychology, educational psychology, or are we treating them like a crop of carrots?
Maybe a bit of both, I'm not sure. There are many different ways we could approach that. The two things that I would really emphasize is the holistic merging of digital technology and ecological literacy. So moving from technology in the classroom to the classroom in the technology. We have our indoor classrooms, we've had them for 100 years. We have our outdoor classrooms, we've had them for thousands of years. Now we have classrooms in the technology. And it's an entirely new way of teaching and learning that if we as educators embrace this, we can amplify and excel our students' learning to a place that society has never seen before. However, this is all predicated on indoor, presently, digital literacy is all predicated on indoor sedentary activities. So when we talk about the conscientious integration of tech and OE3, conscientious is the key word, right? We don't just buy Segways and go for a hike, right? That's not it. It isn't just reading Shakespeare on an iPad. That's just Shakespeare on an iPad. We have to look for really important ways. And here, transforming learning environments with technology, if you can read that. Collaborative work on authentic real-world projects. Flexible progression with multi-path options. Student-centered, performance-focused learning. Information and communication systems. Creative thinking for innovation and original solutions. But let me ask you this. This is put out for technology, how we can do this with technology. But what if we replace technology with canoe trip? How does this change our objectives? Learner-constructed knowledge from multiple information sources and experiences. Student-centered, performance-focused learning. Flexible progression with multi-path options. Integrated assessment for learning. My point is that it isn't technology or nothing. There are many ways that we can inculcate our students with the skills and competencies that we really want them to have and that they really need. And in order to do that, we look to a number of different options dependent on who we are teaching, where we are, and what our desired outcomes are. So this is the classic 21st century classroom. Google 21st century classroom, you're going to find kids sitting in front of computers, sitting in little cubicles. That's scary to me. Different things. Or, you know, we've got fancy wheels on movable chairs, 21st century classroom, chairs with wheels. Okay, that's one way of looking at it. But let's imagine a 21st century classroom that speaks to our kids' natural dispositions, and I use natural very intentionally. We can integrate the digital technology in a meaningful way Things like QR code readers that have students going on self-guided hikes, using iPads when appropriate, conscientious design, and judicious application is a word I like to use. Heady, but I like to use it. The judicious application, are we saying that every kid should carry an iPad while they're hiking? No, absolutely not. But we bring out the iPads when we think that it will enhance their experience, when we can use that classroom in the technology to give them a more meaningful, rich experience, to help them be creators of knowledge and get them sharing their experience with others. Because I can reach out to the 25 people that are in this room right now, and you probably might go home and tell 3 people. That would be great. But we're live streaming right now through Google Hangouts on air, and I'm going to post this on Facebook, and Bob's going to share it, and Jesse's going to share it, and we could reach not 25 people, but 2,500 or 25,000 people. So it's how we use communication to amplify our students' experience. How can they share their knowledge? And I very intentionally put kids sitting in front of a computer, because when we talk about this, there'll be days when all they do is sit at a computer and work away. And there'll be days when all they do is canoe without any, in a totally analog environment. But these we see as all complementary. The future is in our hands. The creative economy, the digital economy, the knowledge economy, it's all here. We, as educators, and especially as experiential educators, we already have been doing the creative, collaborative, student-driven, student-centered, multidisciplinary approaches for 20 years, 17 years, 100 years in some cases. We go all the way back to Montessori and Piaget. And we just need to integrate digital technology. The 21st century, here's the secret that I found out, the 21st century education movement, the leaders in this movement are trying to figure out how to get to where we are. And if we can integrate digital technology into what we do, we are the leaders. We will chart this course for the new millennium, and we'll be able to create in our students a sense of wellness and success, right? We'll inculcate them with the habits of success to be genuine, compassionate, caring citizens on the planet Earth. So, in harnessing the winds of change, here's what I think we need to do. Data-informed decision-making, absolutely critical. It's not how we feel about programs, whether we feel they're good or we feel that they just don't resonate with us somehow. It's what the data says. These programs, if they increase student success on by whatever metric we choose to use, a standardized test, if they get better marks in science, then it's a good program and we should expand it, right? And it doesn't have to be perfect the first time. It isn't either perfect or not. It's a system. We iterate as we go. We build this thing, we test it, we model it, we see what's working and keep going for it. For the educators in the room, get on Twitter. It's the simple litmus for that first step. It's free, it's affordable, it's easy to access, and it is by far the most powerful personal and professional learning network I have at my disposal. I spend way too much time chasing down articles. Fascinating, cutting edge research. So that's your entry point. I ask of you, please just get on Twitter and check it out. You know, see if it works for you. Stay wondrous and embrace the change. Be adaptable, be flexible, and let's lead this 21st century education movement. We're already there. If we just get the data and take a few challenging, daunting steps forward, this is our future. So, oh, and this is where I was going to talk about Finland and the PISA model. But let's showcase the Wood Street model, or the Yukon's experiential education model, because it is by far the best, most comprehensive, most successful I have ever come across in extensive research. And I'm very, before I say anything else, I'm very honored to be co-presenting with Bob, who, as you all know, is very outspoken. He's fantastic, but he's also a phenomenal inspiration for, I don't consider myself young anymore, but people who are new to this field. And without people like Bob leading the charge, I wouldn't have the passion and vision and direction that I feel that I can bring to this. So thank you, Bob. These are my 3 takeaways. I think I just went over them. This presentation will be available on my website, iterated.ca. It's a educational consultancy that I run. I am here on my own nickel. I was not paid to come up, and I just felt that the Whitehorse community and Yukon has given so much to me and helped me through my research that this is something that I really needed to do, and to applaud you for the hard work you do and the great successes you enjoy. So, thank you very much.
I'm going to go through this, and then we'll have a question period.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay. So mine's not quite as flashy a presentation, but it deals with something that you'll find very interesting, I think. Brad talked about a contemporary process, looking at what students were doing and their perceptions of what is happening when they take these kind of programs. And I argue that the real test, and it's not just me, I mean, I started with this process by Colin Kelly when he was chairing the Ed Reform Committee, recommending that I really look at this kind of question. He was familiar with the stuff I did with you, Jim, 20 years ago when we examined the function and role of experiential science to see whether we should expand those programs. And Deb, you were part of that expansion at one time, you'll recall. And we did a research that followed parallel cohorts of kids, those that did ACEs and those that did not do ACEs. And from the data we collected, it became clear that these processes engaged kids in a different way. So what I did is, this is not a departmental process like many of the research projects I've undertaken in the last 40-some years, but this was an initiative that I took on with Kevin O'Connor, who's now a prof at Mount Royal University, who taught in experiential science and his PhD in the field, and Gord Sturrock, who's doing his PhD in the field, who set up a program called Experiential Studies at Centennial High and ran it for a number of years. And what I decided to do is to examine not what we're doing now, but the long-term test of the quality of our education. So I'm interviewing students that have been 10 to 20 years out of school. So they're between 25 and 37. Sometimes tougher to get hold of these people. Wait a second. If you look at this, where are we? Okay. And what I did two parts of a survey. One was I said, okay, tell me what you did in post-secondary programming. That's a simple kind of analysis. Did you do anything after you left school? What's going on? Let me just the down key? Yeah, good. So what I wanted to do is start off with a contrast between what the 2012 school exit survey says and what's happening with parallel data. And I know it's not the same time zone, but the information will be useful. So I have here two things. The first is an N of 71. That's about 40% of the students that attended some post-secondary institution. That's of the 176 students in total. So they were able to follow in this school exit survey, a 15-minute phone chat. They were able to follow about 20% of the students. I'm following about 50% of the students that were in experiential science from 10 to 20 years ago. So we have about an N of about 160 kids. It's a little harder to get hold of people. It's interesting because much of this is serendipity. People you saw with their kids, parents that you see in the grocery store say, oh my gosh, and you say, what's your kid doing nowadays? And you get these accounts and emails and some of the stuff out of the post-secondary grants have been able to track kids. But the really interesting results are the comparisons. How well do you think high school prepared you for this? And I'd like you to keep that thought in mind. And this is a school exit survey. So if you look at this, somewhat was the answer for the vast majority of kids. When you look at this slide, this is where it really becomes interesting. Here is a slide on figure 19. This is just taken directly out of the survey. This says what students are doing. So among all respondents, about 18% had some high school. That means they didn't complete high school. The group between 18% and about 73% finished high school. And a group of about 25% did some post-secondary. The other table shows you the results I had over that 10-year span of students that did ES. 4% directly went, by the way, every one of them finished high school. 4% went directly into employment. And 7 or 8% went into business and the trades. That's what they principally focus on. But trades meant they became tradespeople. So they got a certification in trades, but 84% went through university. Now, I'm not saying that post-secondary success, but I think that if we're in education, then we see a real merit to finishing off school. We see a real merit in saying, this is worth something. We wouldn't be here if we didn't believe in that. So the notion of how do we engage young people and how do we keep them hooked was a real focus of this process. And the survey I did, the second part of the survey, was an in-depth analysis. Now, people report to me it took between 1 and 2 hours to fill the survey out, open-ended. So this is, so I've got about a 75% response. So I've got 37 students that have responded now. And I suspect this has been going on for 4 years, and I suspect it'll be going on for another couple of years yet. And it is partly serendipity who you encounter that's prepared to answer these questions. And the survey is a survey of citizenship. So yes, I'm asking, what did you do in school? I'm asking, have you traveled at all? Because travel is a really interesting indicator of self-confidence and ability. What kind of employment have you got? Have you got a family? Are you giving back to the community? Are you volunteering? Is there anything you did in your high school that stood out in your mind as making a difference? A host of those kind of things are assessed in open-ended surveys. So what this shows you is here's where the university programs go. Now we had, do you remember we used to write common exams in biology, chemistry? I sat on the biology one and prepared the exams for students. And after a while, my colleagues wouldn't say, no, we don't want the kids in ES to write these things. For 5 years in the departmental exam in geography, they're the top class in BC. Yet we're spending more than half our time out of the school, or half our time out of school, doing 6 courses, not 4. And I took experiential science as the focus because it did something different. It was saying, can we actually cover what you call these core academic classes in a set of field studies and labs? Or does it all have to be didactic? Do I have to sit there and lecture? Because that's a pretty common kind of trend, that we only cover it if we talk to about it. We don't cover it if we pose a puzzle and kids have to struggle with it. So it really is a large sense of it at a fundamental level in the inquiry process. When you look at these, I didn't include this because I got a answer from a kid, and you'll have to forgive me because when I was in Ross River last week, I'm talking to my kids who are now grandparents, and it's easy to forget that they grow up too, you know. And I was talking to a former student at ES. He said, I'd love to come to the Yukon, but there's no employment for me there. Presently, the head of a research project at Imperial College in London. I'm the head of hematology, but I have a better understanding of general biology than all of my colleagues. I still have, my ranger chokes me up. Well, and so it should, because passion is the thing that drives this process. I don't want to lose sight of that. Okay, so you can see what these people are doing. That's not the important part of this. By the way, this is a presentation Kevin O'Connor and I are doing in Rome in 3 weeks. We sent our paper, and our argument is this. In today's world, it's an important argument. We can grow environmental responsibility among our students, ecological responsibility, so they feel personal responsibility for doing things. We can grow that if we change the convention of our practice. If we have young people involved in real projects and they do things that are important. So I've just taken excerpts, I've had hundreds of these, excerpts from what students said. So this is the impact experiential science had on subsequent choices. And tell me if this doesn't resonate. Now don't forget, these are people in their 30s. They got families, they got all this, and they're recalling something that happened 10, 15, 20 years ago. And they're writing these responses. I mean, we could have taken many of these kind of comments. Okay? Next one. That was on subsequent choices. Now you look at the dates these people are responding in. So it gives you a sense of the kind of relevance that social interaction plays in the learning process. If our big intention in education isn't at some point citizenship, I'd like to hear the debate about what it's about. Because some point along the line, we move beyond school and become citizens. And our big process, the big picture, is what we do in terms of getting people to that role of responsible citizenship. Next one. So I left open-ended comments. You know, these comments, Nicole, I think validate the point you were making to me yesterday about why we want every kid to have these kind of experiences. And then it's interesting because I think that I wrote a paper for Colin Kelly, and he's doing this thing on different models for school organization, and I ran through about 200 of different models you can organize school on. Many are based on administrative convenience, many are based on whatever the heck it is, but few are based upon the strategy for how do we optimize engagement. And really, if we want to look at that, then maybe we have to change those fundamental paradigms of how we think of organizing our schools so that they give us place for the kind of points these young people are making. Well, not so young anymore, I guess. You know. Well, that was my going. Under 20 minutes.
That was great.
And that doesn't always happen, by the way. I've given a copy of the paper. This will be the third paper that O'Connor and I have written. Last year, we were keynote speakers at a conference for the European Science Institute on how to create young people that have integrated in sense of sciences, that see science in another sense. This one we've presented here. We've done 2 presentations to the Association for Experiential Education about those kind of strategies. And I think that what has happened is in case you hadn't noticed, older and grayer than I used to be. I have these pictures in Ross River in 1968 and 69 when I was coaching you in wrestling and you were coaching me in skiing gym. And the kids didn't even recognize us, unfortunately. There was a lot less of me then than there is now, unfortunately. It's really interesting about how the longitudinal view is merit. What do you folks think? Are there comments or questions?
And I'm probably kind of alone in this, sitting in the back here by myself, but speaking as a non-environmental science or geology or geography person, but somebody who finds it extremely fascinating. One of the things, you talked about the Wood Street model, there's experiential learning in all kinds of things.
Absolutely.
Right? And one of the things Jesse and I were talking about one time was the idea of integrating more than one subject too. The subject areas don't have to be as siloed. Justin and I were talking one time about even bringing role play into the idea of doing things out in the environment and incorporating the digital. I'm trained in theater, and that was what I taught for many years. So the idea of experiential learning to me, I found it very strange when I left the drama classroom and had people going, oh my God, this is so strange, this idea of experiential learning and cross and they're doing this. And I was like, you talk about, man, that's what I do.
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean? And what do you mean you can't mark engagement? What do you mean you can't evaluate that? That's my bread and butter. And it was very difficult for me to actually go the other way.
Sure.
You know, we were saying it's a real challenge for people. For me, the challenge was to not see that as an opportunity. And for me, it's sort of saying, okay, this is fantastic, but we also still need to, when I teach drama, I don't just want them to do plays. I want them to create things. I want to bring social justice in. I want your play to be about something, social justice, that was always something that they had to bring in. Environment. You're interested in science? I want you to write me a docudrama about the environment, and you're going to bring in research.
Well, I hope you saw in those comments that these young people are talking about quantitative chemistry. They're talking about the difference they can make.
Exactly.
Tell me, couldn't I do an effective program that can integrate all kinds of stuff in training dogs or dogs training me?
Absolutely.
Oh man, it could be anywhere. And one of the things, and then, I spoke to you last week, Nicole, about the value of REM, is at some point along the line, and this has been looked at, kids making some kind of choice involved in this, and the capacity to move and be a little more flexible. Say, oh, well, okay, this week we're all going to be in these 5 or 6 different groups, and you'll be integrated, and we'll cover these things. I remember teaching these kids, I was doing ES years ago, and some kids said to me, oh, Jesus, Sharp, we haven't done enough geography, we're not going to pass the course. I said, I'm giving you tomorrow's exam. Or tomorrow I'm going to give you last year's departmental exam. You're in the departmental exam. We didn't study. I said, I'm not going to count it. I'm just going to give it to you to see how you're doing it. And they were astounded. And one kid said, we know all this stuff. Yeah, you're not recovering it. You know it. You stood in front of the men in hall and saw those seracs and all the green black, You did these, you worked with Merv Wilkinson on looking at his argument about how we should harvest the timber, then you were in these big clear cuts. So those kind of models argue a sense of responsibility.
Oh, and there's opportunities. I mean, kids who wants to be a filmmaker on a canoe trip can get incredible footage.
Yeah.
A kid who's a musician, you turn that girl loose during a winter trip. I don't know if any of you have seen the footage of, I forget where they were, drummers using ice on a glacier.
Yeah.
And it's an entire little film about all they're doing is drumming on the ice, using different pieces of ice, different thickness, and it's found instruments but just made out of ice.
Yeah.
And I love showing stuff like that to a kid and saying it's all around you.
So it's interesting because these experiential programs that we're characterizing are much more than that. That's just a convenient term, which you agree, Brad? Not only they are as much social, they are fundamentally based on inquiry. They're based upon doing something for your community that moves outside of you. It's a bigger picture than, and we just characterize it as experiential because it's a nice term. But I remember one kid came and said, can I take my fiddle with me on the trip to a month-long trip in ES? She bought the fiddle and we're on the ferry and a bunch of young people in their 20s are from Denali and their guides in Denali. And she's shy, so I asked if she can join in. She's leading it. Wonderful. On that ferry, a guy who had been a public defender in Seattle had only seen the worst part of kids. He said, for all my life, I've just had kids that have been really nasty. He says, I'm going to treat your whole class to a meal in that fancy dining room in the ferry because it restored faith in people.
So
We didn't contrive that. I don't know how. It's an environmental condition. So I've taught many years in conventional classrooms. And the conventional classroom can also move into another kind of mode. But it takes a pure mindset.
So the questions, I assume that you've got a lot of support in this room, even though I don't know everyone. So what are the blockages to making this experiential, the marriage between the ecological and the digital? So close. What are the blockages here, even to making that much more widespread?
Well, I would argue we still have a substantial amount of institutional inertia. I interviewed my mom when she was 97, about 10 years ago, and she described school when she went to high school just after the First World War, and the bell rang and she moved to another class, and the bell rang and she moved to another class, and the bell rang, and yes, she did arithmetic, she did English, she did typing, she did. Jeez. We now know how people learn more effectively than we did 100 years ago. Why are we repeating the same process? Institutional inertia drives it. I mean, we know that some teachers are really anxious about this, and you're hearing the same thing about the 21st century curriculum. And I was talking to a former student of mine who's now a teacher in Christ the King, and she was saying, oh, some teachers are really anxious about leaving the textbook behind, if you will. You know, and so there's that kind of inertia that the way the institution's being operated is the way you operate it. Brad, do you want to comment on that? Like to...
Anecdotally, because I don't have the data to prove it, and I would make it based on data, is that a lot of teachers are just afraid. We were raised in a binary model, in a binary system where you either had the right answer or everything else you said was wrong, no matter how close you got. There was no concentric rings outside the bullseye. We need to embrace the opportunities within systems thinking to say, like, I don't know, I'm going to give this a shot. I don't know where it's going. It's about starting to become comfortable with ambiguity, right? The future is very ambiguous. It's not a linear track anymore. It's fuzzy and it's weird, and we just have to do the best we can and get into the idea that with an innovative mindset, that's about embracing change and preparing our students to do the same and modeling for our students what we think they should know. If we think digital literacy is important, and I think it's one of the most important things we can do for our kids to keep them safe and well prepared, then we have to do that too. And it's uncomfortable. And I know a lot of my friends celebrate the fact that they don't use technology in the classroom, and that's saddening to me.
Yes, Simon. Go ahead, Simon.
First off, thanks to both of you for your presentation. I was going to have to duck out a little bit early, but I can't leave. Your presentation's on some academic research, so I can't help but bring an academic lens to what first was a question and is now an observation, because you've answered my question. And my question, had this been, say, a thesis defense, would have been, how might a mixed method approach have changed your study? That question was answered when, Bob, you did your presentation, because you were able to present very much the quantitative, the numerical statistical data pieces with respect to student achievement. And I'm thinking, well, there's more to it than that. And then, Bob, you presented the experiential, the role that experiential sciences plays in identity, the development of the human being and the individual. So my observation more is that I think those two approaches together are really how we need to look at assessing and evaluating
really fantastic scores to one model, but if in their comments they're like, I have no idea what this question meant, so I'm just giving them all 10s. Like, that's important that we know that. So I 100% value both of those things and making it a holistic assessment.
in some ways. And I keep telling these kids, because I want them to behave themselves, that this is a privilege and we're not out of the woods, and I want you to act really well because we need to make sure that this can be maintained. And so they're all thinking, oh my goodness, we've got to keep this going. There's a social reason for us to be here. So I think that has them come to me and tell me this was so important. And the same look that I saw with you, but across those kids' face. And they're going to go home and they're going to talk to their parents. And it's a bit of baloney what I'm telling them, because in reality, if we were to say we're not going to have any more REMs, I think that would actually create I think that would actually create a political peace, because those kids find it so meaningful. And unfortunately, they find much of the 19th century model that we seem to replicate all the time really not meaningful. And I used to look at that clock all the time as a student. Kids still do that, and there's nobody looking at the clock during that whole period of time when they were deeply engaged in things. So I think that whole political piece is not something we have to worry about. We just have to create really good programs that kids are engaged really, really heavily, and they'll look after all of that for us.
A parallel to that, here's one of the kids who are doing that salt in the road and killing caribou analysis, whose parents are involved in highways and are involved in policy in highways. And she says to me, boy, it was a lively session around the dinner table last night, and they're not prepared to stop using salt. That's what she said. But I can see this dialogue going on. Why in the hell are you still doing it? You can see in the discussion and the passion the kid brought to the table. Now, that's not one. That happens hundreds of times. So there's some element in these processes, like the REM processes. You see it again and again in spots. And the real trick in teachers is to say, can I move the daily routine so it doesn't look like that? And you've got a class, you've seen the difference, and you can do it in a classroom when you've got the cohort. Even if it's for a smaller period of time, you've got a group of kids that you know there's some, and it's not even common goals necessarily. But you know what's interesting is, my gosh, we've been doing this study on Cowley Lake now for about, you've been there. How many kids were offline for this, JP? None, AJ. I mean, the fact that we get the damn tube stuck 15 feet into the mud at the bottom of the lake and we can't quite get it out. And we got to figure out how in the hell we can get the damn thing out with everybody working at it. It's a problem-solving process, all inquiry. And then we do the next step, which is looking at diatoms. And your kid sends me some of these diatoms they can't key out. And I said, good, because you're only classified to the order. Go online and find what it is and see if you can find the family or the genus of this particular diatom, because it'll give us a bunch of fun. It's endless. But it requires that kind of enthusiasm on part of the teacher. And we had a great day. Well, that was with you guys and the kids.
I wanted to throw a twist in, which is fascinating for me because I've been doing the semester experiential thing, and now I'm doing the more conventional thing. Yeah. And I actually think that one of our future barriers that we're going to have to overcome is not teacher engagement, but student engagement. Yeah. I think, and I'm seeing that because I'm teaching a grade 10 science class right now, and I have some bright, smart students, and I talk to them about going into programs, and they don't want to. And that makes me go like, and I have students who I taught in the grade 9 program who were engaged and motivated, yeah, and interacted with it, and you talk about them continuing in it, and they're like, oh. So it's not to say that they didn't have meaningful experiences in those times. It's to say, like, what is the barrier for them? Because there is a barrier there, and I see it. There is a social barrier. It's a social barrier, and it's all these barriers because there's a barrier that they're having these meaningful experiences and they are engaged, and then they're not continuing on, or that they see value in it, but for some reason they don't identify themselves in it. And I think that's a barrier that that we can break down in Yukon to get more students, because I think the research is so awesome, and I think it's sad that it's not for more student groups.
Well, and it should be for more.
But it's not maybe our barrier, but it's a barrier that I think I see in that.
Well, and also the strategy we use to actually, I believe you said the term recruit kids these days. So when you did RAM, kids didn't have 4 choices. They had lots of choices. And then you said, well, okay, we don't have enough people signed for this, so we're going to do these 7 or 8 or 9 things, whichever it was, but there's a dozen things we didn't do. But recognizing you had a chance to make an input
meant that in that whole crowd from all those communities was there may have been one or two disengaged, but not very many. And so what
What
happens?
happened?
I'm going to argue that when I used to go to Puerto Creek and make the sales pitch, we'd have a third of the class. It's and I hate to use the term sales pitch, but that's basically what it is. What value comes from this kind of choice you can make? And I didn't put that up there. You could have put a half a dozen ones that say, it was so nice to work with a bunch of like-minded colleagues, students, who all thought doing some kind of activity in your title zone was cool. It was more important than the way my hair looked.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's that community. There are other kids who think, well, the most important thing I do, sorry, Remy, is how my hair looks. Sorry, Greg.
If I could jump in just very quickly and try and tie some of these things together. I think what I'm hearing is that, you know, the full semester 4-course things are not for everybody. The conventional moving around every 45 minutes is not for everybody. But we have an opportunity there to say, what's in the middle? So now we've identified this barrier, and this is systems thinking. We identify the barrier. We say like, okay, well, let's. They don't want to be away from school all day. So what if these things don't run all day? What if they run half day? What if they run a full day, 2 days a week? What if they? And it comes down to differentiation of the programs we run, which is tricky because the resources to run all these things. We have to be selective.
Yeah.
But it also comes back, and I'd like to tie this back into what you said as a social justice issue. Right? It is a social justice issue that we are opening opportunities to learn the way that our students, their dispositions dictate. Right? We need to do them something. We do for them.
I know we're running over time. Jim?
Yeah, sorry. It just occurs to me that in terms of exploring time, that First Nations learners have been here for, and in this part of the country for 10,000 years, and we tend to be going this way all the time and not going back to help ourselves understand what they saw and what they dealt with and where and the technologies that they developed and the personalities and the stewardship that came out of that awareness on those sites. But it takes time and a different distinction of the learning opportunities in rather than just September to
But the very point you're making about some of those kids are more interested in their appearance than
Yeah,
they
but
are
then
about
some of
the
them are
events.
really bright though, and they would be great. But they
And
don't
so
have experience.
Some of them are worried, some of them have the idea that they're not gonna go to university if they go to these programs. They have a misapprehension that these programs are not for academic kids.
So I mean that's essentially was the foundation where we created experiential science as opposed to.
I know, but they still have
But it
it.
has
It's
evolved
still a
to not dealing
misapprehension.
with vulnerable
I'm
students.
not so sure. I think that the interview we hear from kids says, no, I was a little afraid it'd be too tough.
Yeah.
We're
Some-
hearing that.
some of that.
You're hearing, no, we're hearing
Nothing.
that. That's the most common thing.
Some
Oh
of
God, you're doing chemistry, biology, and geography in the one semester, and then 3 more courses, you're doing 6 courses a semester. I
get
can't
it.
cope with that.
And the reality is
I still
that,
have
like,
heard, yeah.
you could go back and forth on this for
But
days, right? The reality is we have to be providing choice because
Sure.
it's different. The challenges that our students face are different. Where their confidence comes from,
Yep.
where they perceive themselves fitting in. It's all very different, and when we can offer a variety of types of programs. And so the challenge does become, what do our schools then look like in the future, and how do we continue to be responsive to that need? Because what we know in the Yukon in particular, every one of our communities is very different. So there's not going to be this, and this is, so I agree, there is this cultural inertia, right? But there is also this this culture we have to create that we need to start looking more at the people in front of us for what the services we need to provide and waiting less for it to come from the top down. And that's a scary place for teachers to go to. So like my latest hero is Simon Breakspear, who talks a lot about how are we going to move into this 21st century model where we've got to really shift the way things are going. And so he's talking a lot right now about agile leadership. It can't be a free-for-all of just go out there and try stuff and with people's children and let us know what you landed on and, you know, and then we're going to be on this side of the ministry going, oh oh my God, what's going on? So he talks about have some guidelines, like clarify for people what the guidelines are, because there's still gonna be some. And then mobilize people, start prototyping, start trying different things. And where are you getting that from? The people sitting in front of you and the community that you're in. And then amplify, and that's what we're not so good with in the Yukon, is sharing all of the amazing things. Like Brad, the thing that clicked for me that you said is like all this amazing stuff that goes on in the Yukon. And what saddens me is you probably know more about that than the teachers that are in the system doing it. And that's where we've got to step up, because we need to start sharing that.
I mean, this is what EnviroFund was about. It's an attempt to sort of democratize the process and involve many more. And some schools and some teachers are on board and they want to see it working. And they're really taking the leadership role in that process. And others are reluctant participants, if participating at all. Yet when we surveyed the kids that dug up all the beets last year, man, what a success that was. I mean,
What comes to mind is fixed mindset, growth mindset.
Yeah.
Those teachers that they don't know what they don't know about.
Yeah, I know. Well, I mean, that's part of what we do, and that's why you have here these people involved in the department in experiential support, so we can go and do those kind of things. I'm looking forward to the 12th. I'm going to present a website that we've been working on that I talked to Kelly about that has about 200 different projects that we've done over the last 20 years. And you can use that as a prototype. Oh, gee, you did salt in the road, or you did something else. So having it out there so people know these things have been done before makes it potentially more accessible. But they're just one kind of thing. You know, I was talking to Mary Sloan today, and a whole other dimension could be put in there too.
I had the pleasure of seeing Bob's website, and it's a game changer. It absolutely floored me, the quality and the extent that it goes into the detail. Your comment that they don't know what they don't know is very much like the Socrates' quote is like, all I know is that I know nothing. And what I want to tie that back into is what you said is the Aboriginal perspective, the First Nations perspective, and that 21st century learning is more like first century learning. There's nothing new about it. We just hit, it's a renaissance. We hit the dark ages in the 20th century. It was a terrible time for education. But there was Piaget and Dewey and Montessori, and these people, Vygotsky, and they knew it. They had it at the turn of the century, and they lost it to industry. This is old style education. We have to go back to our roots and relive in this educational renaissance.
And just know that we have a few different tools now. Like when you were talking about the judicious use of technology, one of the things that I think is great is the ability to use technology to not maybe disturb or touch things when you're out on the land. To use a camera to get X number of magnification so that you can do an investigation without actually poking or grabbing, or you can find out so much information without having to disturb, without having to take,
Yeah, that's right.
without having.
Mind you, I gotta tell you that the most common picture we get in these motion sensor cameras, is we have a number of them, are males peeing in front of it, and they don't even realize they're doing it. So we're seeing many more of those than there are bears.
Where are you putting these cameras from?
Well, we're putting them in Spook Creek. We had a bunch of them. Guys walk off the trail. Oh, geez, you know. So we didn't want to put a sign saying "Watch out for the camera," but yeah. So we excise those images. The other question.
Yes, sorry.
I think everybody talked about it. I just wanted to talk about this is old education, but just repeating it. But there's no mention of it in your work. You know, this is like Bob talked about. If you're doing your what, it's all connected. That's a First Nation component. We always believe the circle is our biggest. Everything is connected. You destroy one, you're going to destroy something else. And those are our values. So everything is connected, but I didn't hear that credibility in there as a part of your piece. Maybe you have it someplace else.
In the 20 minutes that I had, I tried to cover
But
as
the
much
other
as
one,
I could.
what was the new curriculum is the 21st century and computers, iPads, and everything. Link the two. It's there. It's there.
What's really interesting, I was in Ross River 3 weeks ago when Selwyn Chihong came and made their presentation to people in Ross River, and they're talking about an 85-meter high dam and tailing pond that's 3 meters long in the headwaters of the Pelly. And people say, oh my God, the headwaters of the Pelly, because Faro is still very clear in the mind, and the fact that the cleanup is going on indefinitely. Oh, let's not talk about Wolverine and Kessel that just shut down and walked away from the mess. So there's all of that is right there in the mind of the Casca people. And so rather than going to a technological meeting, we talked with a bunch of people my age. I'm saying, well, maybe we should look at aquatic invertebrates. We're looking at living things. We're going to respect them. We're going to put them back when we're done. And we're going to understand something about water quality, not through using a pH meter, but by actually looking at what's living there. And that's a heck of a lot closer to the natural cycle, understanding, respecting all that living stuff. Putting it back when you're done is a lot closer to home for the Casca people than using a bunch of meters. Not that you shouldn't use the meters and be familiar with that, but you should do all that.
But that's what I'm saying, like the respectful use of technology. There's lots of ways to use the
Sure.
technologies that will actually support the respect.
Oh, yeah.
and
Data loggers, fabulous example.
Pardon?
Data loggers. We record water temperature in substrate so we know where they restore salmon populations.
Jesse was laughing at me real quick because I pulled out a particular app to do with the stars, and Jesse was like, "Or you could go outside." I think this is an excellent point. But sometimes if you're out here where it's sunny until 11 o'clock at night, that can be a little difficult to
Yeah, I know.
find
To
the
do
stars.
it. I know.
So and he was like, "Okay, well, fine, be that way."
So, stay up till 2. I know.
They do anyway, but it can be hard to get them to focus on that. So there are lots of different ways that you can still use the technology and in ways that support the First Nations way of thinking, and look to see how, or you were saying, like looking at your website and the taxonomy. I'm not sure if anyone here's familiar. It's something or other Earth Life, EOL, Encyclopedia of Life. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that one, but it's sort of a wiki where people are doing all the classifications of the taxons and everything, and to have them cross-reference one of them on source. Great, you've got that source. Can you find 3 other sources that also say the same thing? That's for media literacy.
Sorry, Bob, just being very sensitive to time. I'm happy to stick around and I'm not sure about you, but just before I close out, I do very much want to address your point about the perceived omittance of the Indigenous ways of knowing. And I have a profound and utmost respect, and I draw a lot of my inspiration from that, but as a non-Aboriginal man, I sometimes don't feel like it's my place to comment on that. However, to draw the thread in, how do we connect with the people? And my idea is to take some of the inspiration I take from Indigenous ways of knowing and translate into a language that I think might appeal to policymakers and administrators. And in my extended thesis, there is quite a significant appreciation for Aboriginal ways of knowing. And I just use ecological literacy, the appreciation of systems and interactions, connections, as a way of translating that for my audience.
There are also some kind of hooks you need. So when I come into your classroom with the aquatic invertebrates, I've never been in a classroom where kids say, "Oh, it's boring." Quite the contrary. You hear a lot of squeal. Is that right? I said, "No, don't do any damage. I want to put it back. Keep the things." And then you start once hooked. Once you're seeing these moving things in front of them, they show, well, we built these sucker uppers so they don't damage anything, because you pick them up, you'll develop the exoskeleton. Suddenly we're talking about the morphology of insects, of roundworms, of annelids, all kinds of stuff. Hell, that one activity in an afternoon covers a large lump of the ecology unit you have in Science 10. The Bio 11 unit, you're looking at about 5 different phylum if you're lucky enough in your grab sample. Plus you look at life cycles and a host of things like that. So those as triggering points can be starting spots. I mean, if I did it in your classroom, there's no reason you shouldn't do it in Porter Creek. And Porter Creek has got this phenomenal problem with eutrophication in Hidden Lake and the big flow of phosphates coming out of the fish farm. Oh, geez, it's a mess. And if you want to look up that That'll be on the website. There's about 10 pages on that. We did a waterboard intervention that talked about that thing a number of years ago.
Hard enough time trying to figure out how to walk around that lake to get to my house.
Well, if you wait a little while, it'll fill without you so much you'll be able to walk across it.
When you bring the bus back to your classroom, don't leave your classroom because you come back after lunch, you've got these critters walking all over you.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that. That keeps everybody engaged. When you actually see some of these beetles come out of the water and start to fly around, oh my gosh, it really has everybody's attention. And some teachers actually squeal about it.
Put in the Oak Grove newsletter, no more signs and tattoos.
But yeah, in your class, it was the same thing. Any kids off topic? Oh, and you had some challenging kids in there, and it was an integrated group, and you had kids and little guys and bigger kids, and all working collaboratively. So some of these strategies, and I'm saying we scaffold off these. So that's just one. I mean, there are a dozen things. We can find the same thing in the arts, the same thing in the social justice, same thing in the humanities, and you find 3 or 4 of these little activities that use as scaffolding activities, and we found that it works. I mean, yeah, it works.
Well, and ultimately, isn't kind of the point to let them know that it is all connected? When you leave the classroom, it's not like you separate out language from socials and humanities, and you don't sort of get home and go, well, this is where the socials happens, and this is where the science happens, and this is where the math happens. And this
Well,
is
not only is it all connected, but you have a role to play in this.
They can't see it. They can't see it, they can't feel it.
Okay?
That's just it. That's why we have
Can't
it.
see it, they can't see
Oh,
it.
yeah, you can make, yeah.
Learn without touching it, feeling it, smelling it.
And how are they going to learn if we can't, unsilo it? No wonder they can't figure it out when they leave school if we're not helping them
I mean,
to.
I must admit, some administrators don't see the context of learning outside of the classroom is really learning.
Not for them.
Hey?
Not for them.
Yes, many do. I know, I speak to many of them. I've been one of those for about 20 years. So I understand that there's a reservation on being able to see that is an effective strategy, and they don't understand the notion of scaffolding off that engagement and how that can go to other places. So many of those kind of problems are a dilemma. And I mean, that, quite frankly, is why people like Jesse and I and Jim and others that have had a long history in that are prepared to go and talk to your administrators to talk about some of these kind of things. But I mean, we're prepared to share the stuff we've done right now. This is rather compelling information at a couple of ends.
Like Brad said, it's putting in the language that they're used to speaking.
Yes. Well, in fact, that's why.
We don't need to convince the teachers who teach ES that this is valuable. I don't, like, no offense, Kelly. You're already bought in. You're not my audience. Like, the Minister of Education is my audience. And what do I think they want? Numbers, data. We can improve students' science scores on standardized tests by 7.25%. Students in this thing. There you go.
Well, and I'm going to tell you that's an understatement of what we can do, because when we wrote the common exams, and that was never the thrust of these programs, we weren't outperforming the standard. I remember Grizzly Jones saying, we don't want to write the chem exam with you guys anymore. Why ever not? Well, you've got the special group you're selecting. For the first 7 years, we only chose kids that were compliant. There was no selection process. No, because we were taking, there were 2 teachers teaching the class. We had 70 kids a year. So it was a different model than we have now. So we've got a lot of background data that says you can do it this way. And we've gone over time quite a bit. I get a little excited about this. I'm just gonna turn it out.
We can't have teachers take some of these courses so that they can feel it again.
Yeah. Well, when we do these, that goes back to your best teacher training program. The most effective one we got is where I go into your room, Pat, with a bucket, and we do the stuff right there with the kids, and we walk through it once, and then you can, buddy, will do it yourself. And so that, by the way, is if we bring you to an in-service session, everybody sits down, the return to the activity is slight. If we do it with your kids in your classroom, the return to the activity is much better. It speaks heaps about our instructional, our teacher training process.
And film it and put it on YouTube. That way, anybody can get it. It's not dependent on one person coming in.
Only after you've made sure that you have all the proper documentation signed for releases of student faces being filmed and published.
Well, that's why I got Jesse drilling the core sample of the tree, and
this is, you never recognize it, then he was clean shaven, okay? He had hair. And so,
Looks like a great golf kid.
so we went out there with a bunch of pictures, and I took pictures of Jesse doing all these tree measurements. Why wouldn't you? No reason.
Models.
I shouldn't have asked that question, should I? Okay, that's it.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Now, have I
Pleasure.
seen you on,
You're coming
Thank you
tomorrow.
very much.
yeah,
Just-
what time is it? No, oh, is Jesse, you going or am I going?
We're both coming.
You're both coming.
Collaborative model.
What time is it?
2 to 3.
Hey, thanks, guys. This will be posted on my website, Integrated Education Consultants, Facebook, Integrated Education Consultants. Jesse will have it wherever you need it. Thanks for coming.
Yeah. Yeah, this is nothing new, is it? You know?
No, but it is an interesting part.